We're talking today with Mr. Alexander Gorashko of Vassar, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, Mr. Gorashko, can you start with some basic background on yourself? To begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Saginaw, Michigan, and I'm a first-generation American, a son of Russian immigrants. And my father had a grocery store in Saginaw from about 1921 to 1926. And I was born in 1924.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, he sold the grocery store and became a commercial fisherman on the shores of the Saginaw Bay near Pinconning. And this is where I started school. I went from first grade till about the fourth grade. And then my father got a job in Saginaw at the Chevrolet Foundry, and we moved to Saginaw, and I began going to South Intermediate School. And after leaving South School, I decided to take the electrical trade. So I went into trade school in Saginaw, and trade school only went to the 11th grade. But I decided not to go to the 12th grade. You would have to go to another school to go to. I wanted to get out and make some money.
Right.
So.
Now, what year was that then that you finished the trade school?
I finished trade school in 1942.
Okay, so by then the war had already started.
Oh yes.
Now, do you remember hearing about Pearl Harbor?
Yes, I was coming home from church when I heard about Pearl Harbor. Yes.
Not on the car radio, or?
On the car radio, right.
Okay. Now, before that, had you been paying much attention to what was going on in the world, or since your parents were from Russia, did you notice that the Germans were invading there, or was that not something that you were concerned with?
Well, we had a weekly reader, I guess, that came out once a week, and I remember this fellow called Hitler, and this is about the extent of what I knew about world affairs, but he's quite an important guy, causing a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know. At my age, I didn't know what it was all about.
Right. And then when the war started, did you think that you were going to get into it, or did you just not worry about it yet?
Well, after I got out of school, I had several jobs. I worked in a hospital as a tray setter. I set up trays, and also a dishwasher at one time. And then I got a job as a bellhop at a hotel. And anyway, I remember the manager telling me, "Oh, you'll never be drafted. Don't worry about it. Don't be drafted." I wasn't worried about it, but he says, "You'll never be drafted."
What reason did he have to think that?
I don't know. I don't. I guess maybe he figured they weren't going to be picked on 18-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the reason.
Okay.
But anyway, the hotel job paid $16 a week plus tips, and there was really no future in it. It was nice to make money, but there was no future in it. And I wanted to get into the telephone company. I was always fascinated with all those wires. And every week I went to the employment office at the telephone company, and they weren't hiring. And one day I came, they knew me by name, by the way. One day I came in there and they said, "We have an appointment with you upstairs." I got up there and I had a job as a cable splicer's helper. This was in January of 1943.
Mm-hmm.
January 1943. So just luckily, 2 months later, I got my draft. But the thing is, I did have a job, at the telephone company, which is what I wanted. I got a draft, and anyway, I had to go to Detroit to be examined, and we were sworn in March the 27th of '43. We were sworn in. They gave us 1 week to get home and settle our affairs. And on April the 3rd, there was a train sitting at the Michigan Central Depot taking a bunch of us, like about 200 of us, to Fort Custer, Michigan.
Now, at this point, did you have any idea what branch of the service you would go into or anything else? Had you expressed any preference?
Well, I was always inclined to deal with electricity and radio. I repaired radios for the neighbors. And I decided, and I liked aviation, I decided I wanted to be a radio operator on an airplane. So when we got to Fort Custer and went through our tests and everything, I asked them, I told them, this is what I'd like to do, is to be a radio operator on a bomber. Well, they didn't say yes or no, But the next time that troop train went out, I went to Atlantic City, New Jersey, which is basic training for Army Air Corps personnel.
Right. Now, had you ever taken a long train ride like that before?
No, that was my first time.
And about how long did it take you to get out there?
It took about 2 days. I was quite surprised. We were heading for Detroit, and I thought to myself, well, this is the border right there. Where are we going? It turned out we were going through a tunnel under the Detroit River, and of course, most people don't know that, but there is a railroad tunnel going under the Detroit River. So we went through Canada, and then came back into Pennsylvania, through Pennsylvania, where we saw a lot of electric trains, and then Philadelphia, and then to Atlantic City. So about 2 days, I'd say.
All right. And what kind of facility did they have at Atlantic City? How would you describe the base?
Well, Atlantic City, as most people know, is a place for tourists, and there were all kinds of hotels. When the war was on, the government took over all these hotels and converted them to barracks for the people that are taking basic training. So we stayed in a hotel. Ritz-Carlton Hotel was the hotel where we stayed.
Okay. Now, but they probably had kind of changed the furnishings in the rooms a little bit for you, right? Put extra bunks in and.
The rooms were bare. I mean, there was a cement floor, but it was bare. And then they had regular GI cots in there. I think, if I recall, I think there were 6 men to a room. And that was it. And they had drapes that had to be closed at night because of blackout conditions. But that was it. There was no frills or anything anymore.
Right. Okay. Now, what did your basic training actually consist of?
Mostly marching and learning to march, the drill, what they call drill, learning to march and calisthenics, a lot of calisthenics, and airplane recognition, some first aid, and then they also threatened us with, they call it over the hill. This is where somebody wants to desert. They threatened us with that, you know, or if we're in enemy territory, if we're in the war area and you deserted, you're going to be shot, you know, that type of deal.
Did they spend a lot of time on discipline and getting you to follow orders?
I was lucky. We had some fellows that were a little on the nervous side, and they were when they'd holler right, they'd turn left, and I was real lucky. And another thing, we had some fellows that had beards that were a little on the dark side, and anyway, we had what they call a drill master. He said, well, if your beard starts to show, go back to the barracks on your lunch hour and shave again. And I didn't think that was quite fair, but I was lucky. I had a real light skin and I was young, and I only shaved every other day. So I was always hoping that he'd never catch me on my off day.
Right. Okay. Now, how long did that basic training phase last?
Not very long. I would say it was around a month.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what did you do next?
Well, then there were a group of us. One fellow was in charge, but a group of us went by regular train from Atlantic City to Philadelphia, and then we took a train from Philadelphia to St. Louis, Missouri. And then we took another train from St. Louis to Scottsfield, Illinois, which is radio school. And I was in a radio. Well, when we first got there, our clothes hadn't caught up with us yet because they were shipped separately. And then also we had to do what they call KP, Kitchen Police, for a week or so. And then they put us in a class in radio school. We had a code class in the morning and a radio mechanics class in the afternoon. And this went on, but as you got proficient in the code, the speed kept going higher and higher. And this is where I was running into a problem. I got up to about 16 words to a minute, and I just couldn't get any higher. So there I was. I was not to be a radio operator, and I didn't know what to do, what they were going to do with me. So I just kept on going to radio mechanics school and attending the classes, the code classes, although it was meaningless, and until the class graduated. That was it. We had Saturdays off. We went to school 6 days a week. We had Saturdays off. Now on Saturdays, most of us headed for St. Louis, Missouri, which was a real nice town for soldiers.
What kind of things did they have there to look after the soldiers or entertain them or whatever?
You mean on the base?
Well, actually in St. Louis. You said
Oh,
it
in
was a
St.
nice-
Louis? Well, you had the Admiral, which is a riverboat that goes up and down the river. And then they had dances. And of course there's bars. I didn't drink myself, but museums. But I managed to always find something to do.
All right. So did they tell you what was going to happen at the end of the course? If you couldn't get your code rate up high enough, did you know what was going to happen next?
They don't tell you anything.
But they didn't immediately kick you out or something. They waited until the end of that training phase to decide what to do next?
The way it turns out is the people that finished, if they graduated, they went on to gunnery school. So I went along with them, except that I was not to be a radio operator. So we wound up at gunnery school at Harlingen, Texas. And I enjoyed that. It was winter, and down there it's nice and warm, palm trees and coconut trees, and it was very nice. I enjoyed it. And I liked radio. I liked the gunnery school.
Now, how would they train you to be an aircraft gunner? What did you,
Well,
what kinds of things did they do?
The first thing they do is they have you come along and learn to take a machine gun apart. Okay, you learn how to take it apart, and then you come along and put gloves on, and blindfold you, and then you're supposed to be able to take it apart and put it together that way. And then also there was a jam handy company in Detroit that had a program where you'd have a screen with airplanes coming at you. We would have simulated machine guns at like 3 positions here, and we would shoot at these planes. This is very similar to some kind of a game that you put money in.
Right.
And anyway, this is how they scored you. This is one of the things. And then we progressed to shoot. They had a oval track where a truck went around, and it had the back of it was a platform with railings all the way around. And anyway, we would be on that platform with shotguns, single shotgun guns. And as we went around, there would be these clay pigeons would shoot out at us, and we'd have to shoot at these with a shotgun. And it was no problem, really. All you had to do was blank it out, and bingo, you got it.
Now, had you ever used guns or done any hunting or things like that when you were younger?
No.
No, so this was all new.
No.
All right. But they were training you just for your reflexes to try to shoot at moving objects?
Yeah, right. Okay, then later on we went to a camp that's away from the main camp. And anyway, there they had a turret set up, and they'd have these towers that would shoot out clay pigeons. And you learn to operate that turret, point the gun at the clay pigeon, and you only had one shot. It's just not a machine gun type of deal, one shot. And that was a little more difficult. Well, then we moved to a base where they had AT-6 airplanes that would pull a target sleeve, and we would go individually. We would get in the back of a AT-6 and take off and fly alongside this thing and shoot at it. And the bullets all had different colors, so we could have several men shoot at the same target. They could know which is which. But I did have a little bit of a problem at the time. I almost didn't become a gunner. What happened is the instructions were, you had 2 canisters. The instructions were when the plane lands and stops, you were to come along and climb in, lay one canister on the ground, on the floor, put the other canister in the gun, fasten your seat belt. Well, this all sounded real good. The plane stopped, the fellow jumped out, I got in, did what I was supposed to do, but when I went to fasten the seat belt, it wouldn't fasten. Somebody had cinched it up to the point where the 2 ends wouldn't come together, and all of a sudden the pilot gunned the airplane and they were taking off. We're taking off, and I haven't got the seatbelt fastened yet, and I had to hang on to both of them to keep. We were going up like this. I had to hold on to both ends to keep from falling out. Well, anyway, we finally leveled off, and I was able to readjust this so that I could fasten the 2 ends together. And about that time, the target sleeve is alongside, and I'm shooting away, but it had already been alongside, and the pilot was frantically waving for me to start shooting. But anyway, I come along and shot the first canister and then put the next one in, and we landed, and the pilot had me stand at attention. I started to say something. He said, "You're at attention, soldier." And I was finally able to blurt out the fact that I couldn't get the seatbelt fastened. Well, then he said, "Well, how much ammunition do you have left?" I said, "About 21 rounds. He says, "Well, I'll pass you then." But I was real close to getting washed out, and it wasn't my fault, you know. So anyway, we got a coveted gunner wings after that, and we were done. Well, no, I take that back. We flew in a B-24, and we operated all the turret positions, and then we graduated. So.
All right. So when was that then that you finished the training?
The training this was in 1944 that we finished.
Okay. And do you remember what time of year it was by then? Were you in the spring now, or?
Let's see. When I finished gunnery school, it was at the end of winter.
Okay.
It was the end of winter. I would say probably around March or somewhere in there.
Okay. So it was before D-Day and the Normandy invasion and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Now, once you complete all of that, then what do they do with you?
Well, then I had what they called a delay en route. This means they weren't quite ready for us at the next station. It wasn't a furlough, it was just a delay en route, so I was able to come home. But anyway, I went from there to Lincoln, Nebraska, and apparently this is where they make up crews and things like this. And they made up a crew, but I didn't meet the crew until the last minute. But anyway, the pilot, the officers went on one train, and we went on another train. They kept us separate, and we wound up at Tucson, Arizona. This is where we take the training as a crew together, and B-24s. And I was a tail gunner. This is what I was told at gunnery school. I was to be a tail gunner.
Now, what differentiated between who got to be a tail gunner and who was something else?
Well, first of all, the size. The small guys, they wanted them to be ball gunners. Now, if you know anything about the ball is about 5 feet diameter. It's got 2 machine guns in there, and it's got 2 canisters with ammunition, and it's got a little window that you can look out of. And anyway, the poor guy, it's all self-contained. I mean, he's there, and he has to depend on somebody else to get him out. Mm-hmm. In order to get in and out of a ball turret, the guns have to be pointing down, and the door, which is the backrest for the gunner, the door opens up and he gets in. Once he gets in, that door is closed, and it is now a backrest while he's flying. And he has to be in that thing for maybe 5 or 6 hours. So you don't drink any coffee or anything before you go on a mission.
Right. Now, what was the physical setup like for a tail gunner?
Well, the particular tail turret that I was in was an old style. I was skinny, but I had broad shoulders. And anyway, I'd be sitting just about like that. It was that cramped, and it took somebody with a foot in my back to get me in. And I just swore if they had those things overseas, I was not going to fly. But when we got overseas, of course I'm getting into another story, but the turrets overseas were bigger. They were much wider, and they had doors on them, which we promptly took off. So anyway, let's go on with the story now.
Okay, so basically you've gotten, now, did you actually meet the officers of your crew in Nebraska, or did you have to wait to meet them until you got down to Arizona?
No, we met them in Nebraska, but we didn't get a chance to associate with them.
Right. And then how much flying did you actually do together before they shipped you out?
Well, in Arizona, I would say probably about a month and a half of flying. We flew all over the country. I say the country, the western part of the country. And anyway, we flew a lot of night missions. You see, there were not enough planes for everybody to fly days. So we had bunches that were flying during the day, and we had other people who were flying at night using the same planes. So that way we were able to get by with what airplanes we had. Right.
Now, what can you tell me about the men in your crew? Was this the crew that you would fly with when you were over in Europe?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And you kind of have done some sort of profiling of them or something like that.
Yeah, well, I've got a profiling. Well, not in my book. My profile is of
Of the other prisoners.
Yeah, right. But anyway, the pilot was from Lanark, Illinois. He was a very nice guy. He was on the slim side, and he was very nice. And the co-pilot was from Texas, from right near Dallas, right near Dallas, and he wanted to be a fighter pilot, but for some reason they put him in a 4-engine airplane, and he was not happy about it, but he was just doing his job. Mm-hmm. And then the bombardier, he was a kind of a heavy-set Irishman from, I think, New Canaan, Connecticut, I believe, and he was, I call him a smart ass because he was always after me. He's always picking on me. But anyway, then the other fellow was a Jewish fellow that's from Brooklyn, New York, and he was the navigator. And the only one that really gave me a problem was the bombardier. He used to call me Feets. I had a size 12 shoe, which is rather large. And anyway, somebody, I guess it was their engineer, started calling me Feets. So this officer started doing it. And I just thought that was out of place. Like we'd come to the plane and he'd say, well, have you got your all inspecting done, Feets? And I'd say, my name isn't Feets, it's Alexander Gorashko. Well, that's okay, Feets. You know, he just kept after it. But anyway, those are the pilots. The pilot and the officer. There are 4 officers.
Right. And then what about the other gunners?
Well, the nose gunner, he was from Connecticut. His name is Edwin Doctor. And he was a nice guy, kind of a joker. And I really don't know a lot about him, but he was an easygoing guy. Then the fellow that was the engineer, actually an engineer and top gunner, he was from Georgia. And he was, well, he was a drinker for one thing. And I guess he knew his job. I really don't know a lot, but he knew his job. He was good, whatever he did. Well, then radio operator, he was a waist gunner. Incidentally, we had radio school, but these guys never operated a radio when they got overseas.
Right.
But he was a radio operator. But anyway, he was a waist gunner. He was from Indiana, and I chummed around with him. He was a nice guy. He played the harmonica, and he and I, when we were over in Italy, we would go off. We went sailing together for one time. He was a real nice guy. And anyway, he was responsible for the ball gunner. But the other waist gunner was Charlie Overton. He was responsible for me. And when I say responsible, here's the deal. In a tail turret, when we get over an area where they're shooting flak at us, over a target area, we have to wear some armor. And anyway, I cannot put the armor on and get into the turret. If you try putting it on before you get into the turret, it'll all fall off because it's fastened together with clips. So I would get in the tail, get in my position. Charlie Overton would come along and bring me we called it a flak suit. He would bring me the flak suit. I would hold a piece in front of me, the chest piece. I'd hold it. He would hold the back in position and pass me some straps. I would clip the straps together. Now I had the front and the back. Well, then he would handle me another piece that would go over the abdomen, and that's about the extent of it. That was the extent of his responsibility, because once I got out of there, the flak suit was going to come off.
Right. Now, did you also have to wear a heated suit for flying at high altitudes?
I wore a heated suit. I had booties, gloves, and a suit. I called it a bunny suit. Normally, I guess a bunny would be pink, but this was blue. But I called it a bunny suit.
Right. And you would wear the armor on top of the flight suit then?
Right. You wear it, and you also, in addition to that, we also wore a Mae West, inflatable Mae West. Everybody on the crew had to wear one, because overseas we had to fly across the ocean, or Adriatic Sea, and when you did, you never know, you might have to crash land or something. You wouldn't have time to put this on, so you wear it all the time.
All right. So they have you pretty well loaded up there for all that. All right. So you go through your training down in Arizona, and then you finish that, And then what's the next step for you?
Oh, we trained Arizona, then we went to Topeka, Kansas, and there they came along and gave us all the clothes and everything that we would need to go overseas. For example, the gunners, they got a helmet with some kind of lenses that went on front, and they were different shades. One was yellow, and same thing like the skiers have. One was yellow, and another was a dark green or something. But anyway, that was a kit that we could wear these however we felt, you know, that it was best for us. And then they issued us some aviation sunglasses, 45 pistol with a harness where it went under your, and boots and heavy clothes for wearing, and a heated flying suit also. Everything was brand new, and they gave us a big bag. Oh, the bag must have been 2 foot long by 18 inches or so around, that we kept all this in. And anyway, this is everything that was to go overseas with us.
And then do they issue you an aircraft to fly over, or how do you get over?
Well, at this particular spot, some crews were given an airplane to fly. And anyway, they would fly down to Belém, Brazil, and then fly over to North Africa. Unfortunately, we were not given an airplane. We were put on a troop train and sent down to Newport News, Virginia, which is right down there by
it's Norfolk and Chesapeake Bay. Yeah.
Norfolk area. And we were there for a few days until they were able to get us on a ship. And it was SS Santa Rosa was the ship that we went on. And it was, in the peacetime, it was a passenger freight ship between South America and Newport News.
Mm-hmm. All right. And about how many men do you think they put on it?
Oh, we had infantry people and everything. I must have been a couple thousand, I guess.
Yeah. So big ship and a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then did you sail across the Atlantic in a convoy then? Or
Yes, we did. Yes,
okay.
we did. Uh-huh.
And what do you remember about that voyage?
Well, to me, it was a real pleasure. They had issued, somebody had issued a lot of pocketbooks, and I was able to lay up on the deck in the sun and read a pocketbook. And a couple times I had to guard a refrigeration locker downstairs, and I read a book there. To me, it was a real pleasure.
Okay, but the weather was good? And
the weather was good, yes.
Did you have any U-boat scares while you were going?
No. Mm.
Yeah. All right. And then where did they land you when you got to the other side?
Well, we landed at Naples, Italy.
Okay.
And anyway, we were put on I guess it was a kind of a trolley. It was a train, but it was a trolley. And part of it, underneath Naples, it was underground. Out in the suburbs, it was out in the open. Mm-hmm. And when we got on, it was an underground. But after the train moved, we moved out into the open. This would be in the northern suburbs, called Bagnolio. And they put us up in a building that was supposed to be, Mussolini had it built for underprivileged children, and it was empty at the time, and it had terrazzo floors, several floors. And it was all completely, no facilities. You slept on your blankets or whatever, your clothing or whatever you had right on that hard floor. And the officers slept on one floor, and the enlisted men slept on another floor.
Okay. Now, was there an air base there, or were you just waiting for it to be deployed somewhere?
We were just waiting to be deployed. Uh-huh.
Okay. Now, did you get much of a look at Naples when you landed there, or did they just move you off the ship and onto the train?
Well, seeing that we were out in the suburbs, we got into Naples a couple of times, but not for very long. But we got a chance to go to Pompeii, which is the ancient city that was destroyed by volcanic ash.
What kind of condition was the modern city in at the time? Was there battle damage there, or was it messy or crowded?
No, I didn't see battle damage in downtown Naples, no. No.
Okay. And did you see much of the Italian population while you were there?
Well, I met an Italian girl. Her name is Alino Esposito, and we were watching a man preparing something on a grill, and I asked her. I said, can I buy you one? And she said, well, I speak English. And anyway, later on I asked, I said, well, where do you work? She said, well, come with me and I'll show you. So we went a few blocks down, and there was a grove of trees, and behind it were some tables and stuff, and she says, this is where I work. And I said, well, what do you do? She says, well, you buy a bottle of champagne, and for 75 centésimos more, I sit and drink it with you. Well, I was not a drinker, so anyway, that night she says, well, meet me after work and you can take me home. So I met her after work and we went downtown Naples, but she didn't take me home. She just left me at a corner and said goodbye. She probably had kids, you know. So anyway, she said, I'll see you tomorrow. So the next day I got a hold of Charlie Overton, my buddy, and he drank. So we went over to this place. I bought the bottle of champagne and she sat on my lap. But that was the extent of it. I mean, there was nothing to do with sex or anything. But we were all they were in a position where, you know, the war was on and everybody had to do what they could to stay alive, you know.
Right. Now, when did they move you out then to an air base?
Well, then we got on a train. A whole bunch of Army Air Corps people got on a train, and we went through the southern part of Italy, through tunnels and mountains and everything else. And I'd say we were 2 days to go about 100 miles. Mm-hmm. But we finally wound up on the eastern side of Italy, near the what would be a horn that sticks out.
Right.
And anyway, we stopped at an open field and got off, and there should be 24 bombers sitting nearby. So our captain, our pilot, was engaged in conversation with somebody higher up, and then after a while, they had what they call a mail call. I didn't get any mail, but anyway, the pilot was standing there, and the captain come along, and the pilot grabbed his stuff, and he says, well, let's go. And we walked over to an airplane, and anyway, I'm looking all over for parachutes. No parachutes. But anyway, it didn't matter. We took off and we flew 500 feet off the ground. So with the parachutes, it wouldn't have done any good anyway. But anyway, we landed at a field, and the captain got out and he says, welcome to the 736 Squadron.
All right.
And this was our home.
Okay, 736 Squadron, and what bomb group were you part of?
454th Bomb Group.
All right. And now what airfield were you at?
Well, Chernola was the nearest city. I could see the church maybe 2 or 3 miles away. It was a rather large church. But Chernola was the town.
Okay. So you weren't at Foggia, you were then at a different...
Well, it was near Foggia.
Near Foggia, okay. So it's part of that complex.
Yeah, right.
There. All right. Now, how long then was it before you actually went and flew on a mission?
Well, it wasn't very long. I would say it must have been 3 or 4 days, and that was it.
Okay. And how does that work in terms of finding out what you're going to do and where you're going to go, and on a day when you've got that first mission, what happens?
Well, first of all, I want to mention that our living quarters were terrible. Mm-hmm. We had a 6-man tent, and when we got up to it, all the stakes were pulled out and the thing was just hanging there. And the electricity, they had a electric light wire going to it, and there was no electricity. And we finally had to get that all set, and there's no bathing facilities at all. You had to come along, and, well, what we did, we got a hold of an ammunition box and built a fire under it and heated up some water, and we took sponge baths. And for water, they had a water trailer parked. If you needed some water, you went and got it from a trailer. It was good water. Mm-hmm. And the facilities were terrible. But anyway, now you're talking about how we went. Anyway, they would have a bulletin up in front. The layout was a horseshoe shape, and we were over on one end of the horseshoe on this end, and at this end was what they call the day room and the kitchen and all that facilities for us. But there was a bulletin board out there in front, and the mission would, in some cases, would be on a bulletin board, but a lot of times we didn't know. Most of the time we didn't know. We were instructed to, somebody would come around in the morning, we're talking about 4:30 in the morning, blowing a whistle, and you have to use flashlights, it's so dark. And anyway, you go to the mess hall, and you don't eat as a group or anything. You just sit down and eat, and it was not a happy situation. Well, when you're all done eating, then you wait out in front and you get on a truck, and it takes you to the 54th Bomb Group, and there we all congregate in a Quonset hut, and there's a map that's covered, a covered map. When we're all ready, an officer stands up, pulls a thing from the drape off the map, and there are two colored threads. One is red and the other one's black. And the red one, I believe, is the primary mission, and the black one is an alternate in case you can't make the first one. And this is usually how we know where we're going. They don't, if they put it on a bulletin board, some spy or somebody, some civilian or somebody could pass this on to the Germans.
Right.
So we find out about it when it occurs. You know, when.
Okay, you mentioned the environment being not particularly happy. I mean, what was morale like in the unit when you joined it, as far as you could tell?
Oh, the morale was pretty good, but it was a type of deal where you're miserable in the morning, but when you come back, you're happy because you're still alive.
Right. Now, you were coming in essentially as a replacement crew, though.
Right.
Right. So somebody else had been lost, and now you're kind of filling their place and taking a new plane and so forth. All right. Did you have a sense of what kind of losses the squadron had been taking before you got there, or once you were there, how regularly you lost aircraft?
No, I'll tell you, when we were overseas, they gave us a talk on how to evade capture and a few things like this. And one of the things they told us is the losses were 5%. And I thought to myself, well, 5%, that's not too bad. Well, it turned out that, I didn't know this until later, but it turned out that it's 5% per mission, but it's 50% for 50 missions.
Right.
So there was a good chance you weren't coming back. You may have gotten killed, you may not. You may have become a prisoner, but the 50% is the odds.
Well, did they actually expect you to fly 50 missions, or was it more like 25 or 35?
No, they expect you to fly 50, but we were not told that the odds are 50%.
Yeah, just a 5% loss. That doesn't
Right.
sound so bad in itself. Okay. Now, where was your first mission to? Do you remember that?
Yeah, the first mission was Budapest. We were supposed to bomb a truck factory, but you know when we have this thing in the morning, they don't always tell us the truth. It was an armaments factory in Budapest, but we were told it was a truck factory. And I believe the reason is that if you got shot down or something and you confessed to bombing a truck factory.
Right.
You know what I mean? They didn't need to tell you, really. All they wanted to tell you is what you were doing was important. That's all you needed to know. You didn't really need to know what the target was.
Right. Okay. Now, describe the process of having the planes take off and fly toward the target. How did that work, and what do you see when you're in the tail of a plane?
Well, first of all, the enlisted men are usually the first ones at the plane. The pilots, they all have their individual instructions, like the navigator has his bunch, and the bombardier will have his bunch, and the pilots have theirs. In other words, theirs takes longer because they've got to know more details. But enlisted men are there first. And usually we just sit around, but sit around on the bombs. But the next thing that happens is that as the truck comes around and drops off some K rations, everybody gets a K ration, and they drop off a couple of cans of juice. The funny thing is, enlisted men always got the pick of the K rations because they were there first. So anyway, we wait until the pilots. So when the pilots show up, then we do an inspection. We walk around, we pull on the propellers, and we look at all the controls and everything on the outside and make sure there's nothing keeping them from working. And that's about it. Well, then when we're just about ready to take off, the pilot and the co-pilot get in the plane, and the engineer, he stands out under a wing with a fire extinguisher, and the rest of us stand off to the side. And anyway, they start the first engine, and he's got his fire extinguisher there. Every once in a while, you'll have a little fire that he can put out. But anyway, then he goes from one engine to the other until all four are going. And then they come along and go through a checklist, checking these engines out. They race them and check different things. And When they're all done, they come along and idle the engines, and then we get on board. Well, we get on board, and it's more waiting. But when we take off, the enlisted men in the back, there's 4 men in the back, 6 men in the front. Now, I don't know exactly where all the men in the front are, but the ones in the back, we have our backs against the bulkhead, the bomb bay bulkhead. We have, just in case we crash or something, we got a little protection. Mm-hmm. But anyway, we get in line, and anyway, when it's our turn, the plane starts to speed up real slow. I mean, the engines are revved up to their maximum with the brakes set. They release the brakes, and the airplane starts to slowly move. And then as it gains speed, you can see the runway just becomes a blur. Now, when I talk about runway, these are metal mats. I think they call them Marston mats or something that fasten together. Then it forms a runway, which is ideal. On dirt, you don't have to put any cement or anything. You just put these mats down. Right. So anyway, it becomes a blur, and you start getting a little worried when you're maybe 2/3 across the field, and you're not airborne yet. And when you finally come airborne, you're maybe about 10 feet above the fence. There's a fence there in a cemetery. So it's a time that when you're very anxious.
I can imagine. Of course, and having a cemetery right there at the end of the runway probably isn't very inspiring either.
If you're going to go any farther in the story, during the invasion, we took off in the middle of the night, and we saw an explosion at the end of the runway, and 2 airplanes had run into each other, taking off. One was taking off from one field, another field, and they hit each other, and there's 20 men. And when we took off, we flew right over them, over that whole mess.
Right.
This is on the way to invasion of southern France.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, your first mission, you said, was to Budapest. Now, did the planes fly in formation all the way over there? Do you have to stay in a position relative?
Yeah, they were supposed to be in formation at all times, and this is so you have the maximum firepower in case of an attack.
Right.
But anyway, when you're over the flak area, you're still in formation, but a little more scattered. And anyway, I can tell you, it's one of the scariest things I've ever been through. I mean, I've heard of infantry guys that if an 88 explodes near them, they're all hiding behind trees and everything else. When you're up there, there's no place to hide. Mm-hmm. And you'll have one that 88 will explode maybe 25 feet behind you, and you wonder, is the next one going to be a little farther north, a little farther ahead, or what? Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you, this is what you do. You pray.
Right.
I was scared when I went on my first mission. I didn't want to go up again.
Yeah. Now, did much of anything happen on that first mission in the sense of did you get attacked by German aircraft?
I should explain. On the first mission, we went with another crew. Now, when I say we, the pilot, and the tail gunner, and I guess it was just the pilot and the tail gunner went with another crew.
Okay.
And this fellow that took care of me, he instructed me on when to do this and when to do that. And anyway, when we dropped the bombs at Budapest, the plane went into a dive like this, and it lifted me out of my seat. And I thought to myself, are we under control, or are we in some kind of a problem? And I remember what he told me. He says, don't do anything until I come back after you. Mm-hmm. Well, he didn't come back after me, so I guess everything was all right. But while we were on this mission, there's a thing they call chaff, which is well, you remember when they used to sell the stuff on a Christmas tree, that tinsel? Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, this chaff was something that was cut to a particular length depending on the radar frequency. And anyway, when you're over the target, you start throwing out this shaft. I don't throw it, the voice gunners do. Start throwing it out as fast as they can. The whole sky is full of this shaft. And now when they got the radar going, all they see is a lot of blur, just a lot of static. So we had to do is they had to resort to optical, so using a type of deal where you're
they had to see you to shoot at
where you can tell how far something is by the angles here. So. But anyway, I'll tell you, I was really scared. We came back, and I thought to myself, boy, I don't want to I don't want to go through this again.
Okay. Now, did you see any German aircraft on that mission, or was
No.
it just the flag?
No, just a flag.
Okay. And did you have any fighter escorts along with you, as far as you could tell?
I didn't see any, but as a rule, the fighters usually flew above us.
Mm-hmm.
So chances are we didn't see them.
Right.
They usually flew quite a ways up, maybe several thousand feet ahead of us.
All right.
So.
Okay. So you survive the first mission, and you get back from that, and then what happens at that point?
Well, the first thing they do is they load you onto a truck, and they take you over to interrogation, and there they've got an intelligence officer that asks you questions.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see this? Did you see that? And all the questions necessary. And then after that, where they had a Red Cross girl that was passing out coffee and donuts, and then there was another line for a shot of whiskey. Well, I didn't drink, but I usually gave my shot of whiskey to our engineer. He was a drinker.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that was okay, no problem. It's a relaxer.
Right.
And then after that, we were free to go back to our living area.
And then how regularly would they have you fly?
Well, the next mission was I think it was about a day later, and it was a place called Bucharest, which is an oil refinery area in Romania.
Right.
And I was real dubious about going up, but I thought to myself, well, you know, I'm here for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
There's no sense in coming along and starting anything. So I went along, and you know, it's a funny thing is, this is a real funny story. I told Charlie, the fellows responsible for me, what he had to do and everything to take care of me. And just before we got to the target area, he came along, gave me the flak suit. I put it on the front, and he put it on the back. And he forgot to give me my steel helmet. That's part of the deal. He got back to his position. By now, the flak was starting. He got to his position. He's throwing out chaff. I got on the intercom, and I said, Charlie, I said, you didn't give me my helmet. He didn't want to leave his position. I said, Charlie, come on, please, give me my helmet. And anyway, finally, reluctantly, he left his position. See, he was sitting on a little piece of stuff too. He was on top of it. Mm-hmm. So he didn't want to leave that spot. So anyway, he gave me my helmet, and we're into the flak, and it's going off all over the place. And all of a sudden, I hear a zing. Piece of flak came down through the top of the turret, bounced off my helmet. So you see, it's just a good thing that he gave me a helmet.
Right.
I'd have probably got a good headache out of it.
At the very least. All right. Now, on this mission, was the flak any worse than it was over Budapest, or would you figure it's all about the same as far as you can tell?
I would say it's about the same as Budapest.
All right. Now, on these first couple of missions that you're flying, were you seeing other aircraft being hit or anything like that, or did that not register with you?
Okay. Yes, there's other aircraft that went down, but where I'm what they call tail end Charlie. Mm-hmm. Tail end Charlie is always the newest crew.
Right.
It's tail end Charlie. Generally, the way it used to be when the enemy planes came in from the back, tail end Charlie was the one they shot at.
Right.
Well, anyway, I was tail end Charlie, and all I could see was both sides of me in the back. Anything on the side of the plane or in the front of the plane, I couldn't see. Right. So other crew members saw other planes go down, but mm-hmm. I didn't at this particular stage.
Right. Okay. And now, how many missions total did you fly before you were shot down?
Well, I had 14 missions, and of those 14 missions, I had 3 doubles. Any mission to Germany, you got credit for two mm-hmm. missions. So that I had 14 missions, and then if you want to knock off 3 from that, that'll give you the actual missions that I took.
Right. What was the farthest you actually had to fly?
Well, that was a rough one. It was a place called Bleckhammer. Bleckhammer is up near the prison camp of Auschwitz, which a lot of people are aware of.
So in Poland, basically.
It was probably maybe 20 miles from Auschwitz. It's by mm-hmm. Poland, on the German border. And anyway, it was a petrochemical plant, And this is a result of the fact that we had just about bombed out everything in Romania. They were starting to run out of fuel. And that was one of the remaining things that they had for fuel was this black hammer plant. They were making fuel out of coal.
Right.
And anyway, it was a 2,200-mile round trip. And anyway, we didn't have enough gas to get back. They really had to nurse those engines. And when we got back, there was, we had to check, I think it was 15 gallons of gas in each tank. This is enough to fly for a couple minutes, 2 or 3 minutes.
Right.
That was it. So we were real lucky on that we made it. But I went on, the mission I got shot down on was the same mission. We didn't have enough gas to get back. And we were going to land on an island in Yugoslavia, an island called Vis, V-I-S, that was controlled by the British, even though the mainland was controlled by Germans.
Right.
Okay. Now, anyway, what else now?
Okay. Now, you mentioned flying in support of the landing in southern France, and that's August of 44. Can you describe
15th,
what that...
I think it was. No, yeah, okay, 15th.
Can you describe what that mission was like? How was that different from the other ones?
Well, the only thing is we had to practice. Let's see, the navigator and the pilot and the co-pilot and myself did a lot of practice night flying. And my job was to make sure nobody flew into us or something as a tail gunner. But anyway, we flew a couple of nights during the night. And then the morning of the invasion, we all had to get up in the middle of the night. But like I told you before, when there were 2 airplanes crashed together, and when we took off, we flew over.
Right.
But anyway, as we were going, we kept joining other airplane groups, and finally we had there were airplanes as far as you could see. It was just miles and miles of airplanes all trailing each other, and we were supposed to drop our bombs at 7:30 at a particular beach. And anyway, we couldn't. By the way, we couldn't find our own airplanes. We couldn't find our own planes, so what we had to do is to just catch up with somebody else.
Right.
When they dropped their bombs, we'd drop our bombs. Well, anyway, we got over the target 5 minutes too late, and we didn't drop our bombs because we might be hitting our own people. So we flew back to Italy, and we elected to drop the bombs in the Adriatic Sea there between Yugoslavia and Italy. Right. And we didn't want to land with them, and that was the extent of it. It was kind of a grandstand show, you might say. We could see. They had a rule, you do not throw anything out of the plane, nothing. No paper, no nothing, because of all those ships down there. And you could see just miles and miles of ships, and the air is full of airplanes. And it was a kind of a grandstand show, you might say. We didn't know what was happening on the beaches.
Right.
You know.
Okay. Was that the only time that you had a mission that was sort of a combat support mission, that otherwise you were doing the high-level bombing of industrial targets? Or did you attack things like rail lines or bridges or stuff like that, or transportation centers?
Well, prior to the invasion of southern France, we bombed a couple of bridges. You know, it's real funny. We bombed at 9,000 feet. Now, 9,000 feet normally, you'd get blown out of the sky if there's any anti-aircraft around. But anyway, there was no anti-aircraft around. We were flying at 9,000 feet, and all of a sudden I felt the airplane rise up, and our bombs were dropped. And we weren't near the bridge. So anyway, of course, being a tail gunner, I can't see what's happening. So anyway, as it come into view, there's an intersection down there of houses on all the bombs dropped right smack in that intersection and blew everything up, and I'm sure those Frenchmen just hated us. But anyway, we got back. I don't know what happened to the bombardier. I don't know if he accidentally triggered these things off or what, but the lead plane is the one with the bomb sight. Right. When he drops his, we drop ours. Well, anyway, he dropped his before the lead plane did, and it dropped in amongst those houses. Right. But when we got back from interrogation, there's no mention of it. There's no mention of it. The pilots protected their own. The officers protected their own.
So even though the bombs had been dropped, you just stayed with the formation and flew with the other planes at that point?
Well, we were tail end Charlie, so
Okay.
you
But
know.
you didn't turn around and go back early? or
No,
anything?
no. Well, the rest of them dropped their bombs,
Right.
but we didn't because we had already dropped ours. But like I said, when we came back for interrogation, there's no mention of our bombs
Right.
not being dropped when they shouldn't have been.
Okay. Now, on any of these missions that you were flying, did you ever see any German aircraft?
No. And I will explain later on this exactly what the deal was. But we didn't see any. It was hour after hour of scanning the sky like this, just looking. Scanning the sky and daydreaming sometimes. You couldn't help it. There's nothing else to do but look and daydream. But I was always concerned about, the sun used to be up about in here when we were coming back, and I was always concerned about a fighter coming in out of the sun. And I had one of these dark things that goes over your eyes. I had one made up so that I could hold it up to the sun, and you know, it wouldn't blind me when I'm looking through that. But if there's anything coming, I'd see it.
Right.
But I never did. But I was ready. But you never know. Maybe at the particular time that I wasn't looking, we'd have got attacked.
Okay. Now, are there, let's see, no, I guess, about how long did you stay based in your air base before you were shot down? About how long a stretch of time did you have there?
We got there about the beginning of July. We were shot down on August the 22nd, so
Okay.
a month and a half.
Not real long, all right.
Right, yeah.
Were there other kind of significant or memorable incidents that happened to you between the time you got there and that last mission when you got shot down? Are there other things that kind of stand out?
No, it was a boring life, though. We had a movie every other night. We had no electric lights, and we would come on and make a bonfire. And just luckily, the people in the cookhouse would give us potatoes that we could roast and some orange juice, and we would sit around eating potatoes, you know, roasted potatoes and orange juice. And this one waist gunner, he would play the mouth organ, and that was the extent. But that was the one night that they didn't have a movie. But the next night they had a movie. We always saw the movie. There's nothing else to do.
Right. There wasn't a town nearby that you could go into or anything like that?
Well, on a couple of occasions we went one occasion we went swimming in the Adriatic, and another occasion we went to a mountaintop village. Some of the guys that drank, they wanted to go to a cantina, and we went in there, and the people are all looking at us kind of funny. I guess it's kind of strange. They were out on a mountain, and normally they didn't see us,
Right.
our people. But other than that, I remember one time we were with a ground crew guy, and now the ground crew had their own showers and stuff, but they wouldn't let us use them. But anyway, we were with a ground crew guy, and we were swimming in a drainage ditch, and all of a sudden a bunch of sheep manure come floating down. And we came back to the base, and we had to use the shower. And anyway, those ground guys were very unhappy about us using their shower.
Sure. All right. Tell me about the last mission.
The last mission? Well, when they announced it was Black Hammer, we all gave a groan. And when we were told that there's a possibility we might have to land on this island of Vis, because it was a long one. But anyway, it was a long mission, and at the target, I saw an airplane. It was on fire, and the wing folded up, and he went spinning down, and we saw a bunch of parachutes. And some of the other guys saw planes go down. It was probably the roughest mission of what we had up to then.
Right.
Well, anyway, then we got about 45 minutes from the target on our way back, and the pilot had the engineer start checking sight gauges. This is where you tell how much fuel you got in the tanks, sight gauges. And anyway, they're checking sight gauges, and they're writing all this information down. And we came to the conclusion that we weren't going to make it back to Italy. We were going to have to land at the island of Vis. So anyway, this went on for quite a while. And then the intercom came to life, and the pilot said, be on the alert, a group has been hit. So anyway, the intercom went quiet, didn't hear any more. Well, then there must have been maybe a half hour later, I think it was the engineer, the top gunner, announced on there, a plane coming in at 12 o'clock. Well, he came down like this, and he went under our group, under our formation, I should say, and he turned, and when he made his turn, he was vulnerable. But all of a sudden, he come along and turned farther, and now he had his belly armor to us, and a plane ahead of us was shooting at him, and I could see the tracers bouncing off this plane, but it wasn't doing anything because he had armor plate. Mm-hmm. Well, about that time, I got my gun, and I gave him a shot, but he was already quite a ways beyond the first guy that was shooting. And we're always told not to use up our ammunition all much. You do it just a little at a time.
Right.
Well, anyway, I gave him one shot, and he was gone. Well, anyway, you don't really have a concept of time, but it must have been maybe 15, 20 minutes. I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden there's explosions going off all around the plane. And I didn't hear anybody call an airplane out. And I'm wondering what's going on. Is somebody up ahead dropping something on us, or is it something from the ground? What's going on? And about that time, I'd happened to turn my head, and the airplane's on fire. The whole airplane's on fire right here, mm-hmm. right next to me. And I had to get out of there. I didn't have time to even say fire. I had to get out of there. And when I got out, I lost my intercom connections mm-hmm. and everything else. And I got out of there. By the time I got out of there, that whole thing was on fire. And anyway, it was uncontrollable. I mean, even fire extinguisher wouldn't do anything. What it was is an oxygen station right here where you plug your oxygen in. And if you get oxygen around aluminum or anything, duraluminum, which has got magnesium in it, it'll burn, mm-hmm. especially if it's an accelerant.
Right. And
the stuff going off was the accelerant. So anyway, I got out of there, and the two gunners are standing there looking, two waist gunners, and they got their parachutes on. And I didn't know what to do. I was hoping for a miracle. And I knew we were going to bail out, but I didn't know. I had my parachute too. So anyway, the one waist gunner started heading into the bomb bay, and I think they must have lost the intercom connection. So he went into the bomb bay to notify let somebody up in front know that the plane's on fire. Mm-hmm. Well, I followed him. And anyway, we're under there in the bomb bay. See, the tanks and everything are right here, and we're standing underneath the fuel tanks. Well, we're under there. We hear some explosions, and I'm thinking that it's my ammunition cooking off in the tail. But what I didn't know is that we were being attacked by another fighter. I didn't even know if it was a fighter at all. Mm-hmm. I didn't know why. But anyway, later on I found out it was another fighter. Anyway, the bombardier, he has to get underneath like this. He's on the flight deck. He's got to get under the flight deck here to look through the bomb bay. He sees this fire. Just as soon as he did, he hit the lever to open up the bomb bay doors. Mm-hmm. Just as soon as he did, the plane went into a roll. And George was standing next to me. George is the waist gunner. He's standing here, and I'm standing here, and the plane went into a roll. And when it did, we fell off this little 10-inch catwalk. And I don't know what happened to George at the time, but I fell off the catwalk, and I got caught into something. About this time, the airplane's upside down. All four engines are going, and we're going down in a dive. Mm-hmm. And I can't get out. My parachute harness is caught on something behind it. It kind of crosses a little bit. I can't get out, and I'm hanging there, and I'm thinking to myself, this airplane's going to hit the ground, and it's going to blow up, and I'm in it.
Right.
The airplane happened to take just a little bit of a roll, and when it did, I came free, and I floated out. The airplane's going on down. I floated out. Well, it's the first time, and it's kind of a panic situation, but I was far enough with the airplane. They say you're supposed to count to 3 and all that junk. Well, you're in a panic situation, you don't even think about that. So anyway, I pulled the handle for the chest chute. Nothing happened. Instantly, I don't even think about it. You just instinctively just come along, pull it open. Mm-hmm. It was tied together with some little strings in transit, so it wouldn't accidentally open up.
Right.
But somebody should have cut the strings, but they didn't. Mm-hmm. So anyway, when I pulled it open, naturally, I just tore those strings that held it.
Right.
What it is, it's a couple of flaps. And when you open this up, there's a little pilot chute that comes out about so big. It pulls the rest of the chute out.
Right.
It opened. Well, anyway, I was dropping at such a rapid rate that there was a sudden jerk, which I call it a stop, but it was not a stop. It was a momentary slowdown, you know. And anyway, I passed out. It just took the blood right out of my head, and I passed out. And anyway, it was just seconds later I woke up. My shroud lines are all twisted together. My one boot is missing. And anyway, I'm trying to figure out, you know, just exactly what to do now. So in the meantime, I'm turning as these things are unwinding, where they're all wound up. I'm learning. I see an airplane down there that's burning, and it didn't look like ours. I didn't see a tail. And anyway, then by the way, I had a sense of euphoria that I was, after all this horrible experience, I was still alive. So anyway, the euphoria didn't last, because I knew I was still in trouble, you know. So anyway, we got down a little farther, and I could hear bullets going by. I could hear the zing of bullets going by. So I thought to myself, well, it must be the guns on the ship down there that's burning. But then the bullets kept on going, and I figured, you know, it kept on zinging by, and I figured, well, it can't be this plane down there. Somebody's on the ground shooting at me. So anyway, when you're in a parachute, it looks like the ground's coming up at you rather than you're coming down to it. It looks like it's coming this way. So anyway, I came down in a tree in a forest, and there's some houses or something along in there, but I didn't get a chance to do much sightseeing at the time. But I landed in this tree, and I just hung there for a moment, trying to decide, what am I going to do next? And I looked down, and I see some movement down there, down below the tree. There's a Hungarian soldier down there, and he raised up his gun, and he took a shot at me. And anyway, I gave up. And I'll tell you, he'd have hit me in the wrong place, I wouldn't be writing no story or talking about it right now. So anyway, he motioned for me to come along and pull this parachute down. Well, parachute's caught all over. No way. And I'm in a situation where I'm quite upset. I'm scared and shiver. I'm shaking and everything else. So finally, I just come along, got my foot in the crotch of a tree, and I slid down. Well, anyway, a bunch of people are around there, and they're all pulling my clothes off, and I hear them hollering, radio, you know. And finally, it got me all undressed and everything, check to make sure I didn't have a radio. Some guy comes along and pulls my wings off. My wings were gone. Another guy comes, a Hungarian soldier comes rushing at me with the butt of a rifle, and he hit me in the back like that, knocked me down. In the meantime, all these other people, there were civilians there too, all these people are grabbing him, pulling him away, and then let me dress. In the meantime, a German sergeant comes along. See, these are all Hungarians, but a German was in charge of them. The German sergeant comes along, and he has me undress again. And all the women or children are standing out there watching all this. So then we kind of got my clothes back on again, and they motioned for me to go to a certain spot. And there was a spot there. Women, everybody was gathered around it. There was a certain spot there where there's a yellow bottle laying there. And anyway, I walked up to it and started picking it up, and everybody moves away. And anyway, I said, oxygen. And one of the guys says, oxy? Oxy? I said, oxy. Anyway, then I told, you know, they understood it was an oxygen bottle. Well, anyway, everybody laughed. They thought that was real funny. So anyway, then they come along, and after they thoroughly examined me, they put one fellow in charge, and he started marching me to an area where they were going to keep us in captivity.
Okay. Were they getting other members of your crew at that point, or were you still by yourself?
No, I was still by myself. But anyway, they marched me past a bunch of houses, and it was hot. It was, I don't know, 12:30 or something. It was hot. Oh, by the way, before we got there, some little kids running alongside of me and offered me an apple. And my arms are full of all my stuff that I got to carry, the clothes and stuff I wore, because you know it's hot. I can't wear them all this stuff anymore. So anyway, I couldn't take the apple. But anyway, we got up to a house, and the guard decided it was time for arrest. So a bunch of civilians were sitting around there. They indicated to me they were Christians or Catholic. I had a cross, by the way, and somebody got me a drink of water, somebody got me a piece of bread. They were real nice, but anyway, then we got up and went down the road another quarter of a mile or so, and we went into a place that was like a little university, buildings and stuff around with a gate. And anyway, that's where they put me in a room. Well, then later on, my buddy Charlie from my plane shows up, and I was real happy that at least I wasn't the only one. But on the other hand, the fact that I barely got out, I didn't think anybody else did, and especially that ball gunner. What are you going to do? You know, like I said, those guns have got to be pointing down for him to get out. And everything happened so fast.
Right.
He went down with that ball turret. You can imagine how horrible that was. And you know, his favorite song was "I'll Be Seeing You." And every time I heard that, I would think about that guy. Yeah, and I was rather glad that they decided the tune finally got taken off the air. They don't play it anymore.
Right. Now, so basically you and Charlie are there together at that point. Did they come and interrogate you, or did they just pack you up and move you someplace else? Or?
No, they had captured somebody from another plane. More crew members. I forgot how many there were. I imagine there were maybe 6 or 7 or 8 something of another plane. They kept us all there. Now when they keep us there, this is funny. They had some sawhorses. They had boards laying across the sawhorses, and that was our bed. But anyway, the next day, they gave us some kind of a soup just made out of potato peelings and tomato peelings and stuff like that, and that was our breakfast, a little piece of bread.
Right.
And then they lined us up, and they had one Hungarian that spoke English, and he said, "We're going to get you all together, and there's a train that's going to pick you up and take you to Budapest." Well, anyway, there was a tall civilian standing next to him, a real tall civilian, and he said something to this Hungarian, and the Hungarian announced, "Are any of you Jews?" And naturally, nobody's going to say yes, but anyway, there happened to be one pilot there that was big and kind of little on the dark side, and anyway, they're pointing to him. He said, "Oh, no," he's making it like it's a joke. But anyway, nothing ever came of it. But I'm sure that this guy was a Gestapo.
Yeah.
This tall guy was a local Gestapo.
Yeah.
Gestapo.
I'll pull them out. All right. So then, do they load you up on a truck and take you off to a train station?
Well, we marched down the road, a straight march, right down the road, right to a train station. In fact, I'm corresponding with a guy, and I tried to tell him how we went, and he can't find where we were. I told him how it was from the train station. He couldn't find it. But anyway, at first it was a dirt road. Then it became cobblestone, and then it became pavement. And there was people standing around and spitting at us and saying all kinds of things. And then we were loaded in a boxcar. We had to sit in one end of the boxcar, and they had a bunch of Hungarian soldiers. They were young guys, and they were real eager for combat. And they're sitting over there with machine guns across their chest, staring at us. And anyway, this went on until dark. And I thought to myself, boy, I'd be real happy when it gets dark. We don't have to look at these guys looking at us, staring at us. So anyway, it was we followed Lake Balaton, which is a long lake in Hungary. We followed Lake Balaton to Budapest. We must have got to Budapest 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. And anyway, the city was darkened, except near the train station were just small lights, just leaving a little bit of light underneath. And anyway, they put us in some ambulances that took us to the Budapest City Jail, where I spent the night in a cell with a young lieutenant, and he and I never spoke a word. I don't know his name or anything. We never said a word to each other. We were so tired, they had mats on the floor, and we just lay down on the mats, and we were just beat. Oh, incidentally, back at the other place, a corporal came in with a couple of privates, and he come along and nudged me. I'm trying to sleep, and he pulls out his gun. He sticks it in my ribs, and he said something, and the privates laughed, and you know, I'm making out like it's a joke, and the 2 privates laughed, and they thought that was funny. Well, anyway, he did it once more, and they laughed again. And then he got tired of monkeying around with me. He woke up a second lieutenant next to me, and he pulled the same deal with him. But that's just an incident. Okay, now we're back to Budapest.
Right. Okay. Now, was that just a transit point for you, or did they keep you there for a while and try to interrogate you, or
No,
what happened?
the next day they put us on a bus and they took us to the Budapest prison, and we went into the prison and we were all put in solitary confinement, and I was in there for 5 days, and they take you out and they take you into an officer, you know, an interrogation officer, and he asks you all these silly questions about what was your target and what was your bomb group, and I told him, I says, I slept late that day and I don't know the target. And anyway, what kind of bombs did you take? And I said, I told you I slept late that day and I don't know what kind of bombs we took. And anyway, it was just a bunch of, just a routine thing. And anyway, he pulls out a book and he says, well, you're 454th Bomb Group and your mission was so-and-so. And that was about it. Anyway, he says, I'll take you, you'll go back to your cell. Well, incidentally, I was burned also. I was burned on my face and hand. I asked for a nurse or somebody to give me some medicine, a salve or something. So he said, I'll put you back in the cell and we'll have a nurse come in and look at you. And then about a day or so later, they put me in a room which was like a library on the second floor, and there was all kinds of bread, more bread than you could eat on the shelves. And some of the guys were there. And I said, well, how come they're not eating the bread? And he says, well, it gives them the GI shits, you know, and nobody's eating it. The guys don't like it. They weren't hungry yet. So anyway, we were in there, I guess, for, I think it was about another 5 days. And then they loaded us on the back of a truck. And we had a couple of pilots for rest leave. They were doing guard duty. Anyway, they took us on a little tour of Budapest, and then we went to a train station and were put in a boxcar. And the two guys, they had machine pistols and stuff. They slept in one end of the boxcar and we slept in the other end. And anyway, it got real cold that night. We still had summer clothes on. Next morning we were in Budapest and we were sitting on a siding. The doors were locked and apparently they went to get us some ersatz coffee or something. The guards did. But I looked out the window and I see this huge Ferris wheel. And it was in the movie The Third Man. Huge Ferris wheel. But anyway, we thought that was really something. But anyway, we spent the day in the railroad yards at Vienna, and the next evening we left by train going north. And we went through Breslau and some of those other places, and it was getting colder and colder as we went north. And it got to the point where you had to huddle up, you know, to even keep warm. So finally, after a couple of days, we stopped during the night, and the next morning we woke up and the train was gone, and somebody's banging on the door. Anyway, it turns out to be a German sergeant from the prison camp, and he says, everybody out, you know. So we get out, and he says, before we go, he says, we have to push this railroad car off the track into a siding. I thought to myself, can you imagine, we're fighting these people using modern equipment and everything else, and we're pushing a railroad car off the siding.
Right.
So anyway, we had to walk about, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes into the woods where the prison camp was, and we had to wait outside until somebody let us in. We got in there and they go through the examination of undressing you and checking your butt for something you might have hidden up your rectum and all that, and taking our picture and fingerprints. And then they let us into the camp itself. And anyway, the barracks were all filled. These are one-story barracks, and they were filled. They didn't have any room, but they had some little buildings outside. We called them dog huts. And each building was it was about 10 feet wide by 10 feet. And there's, if I recall, I think there was 8 men in there, and there was a room. Each man had 1.5 feet. And if one man rolled over, somebody else would have to roll over. But anyway, there was no electricity, no facilities at all. And if you had to go to the bathroom or something at night, you'd open the door and stand out there, but you had to stay right there by the building. The problem was they had dogs running around, police dogs. And one night I had to do that, and all of a sudden I heard this dog come around the corner, and boy, I tell you, I ducked back into the building again, and he's scratching at the door. Maybe he was just trying to be friendly, but I wasn't going to find out.
All right. About how many prisoners do you think were in the camp at the time you got there?
Well, there was 2,000 in each compound, or they call them lager, or the Germans call it lager, we call it compound. There were 2,000 in each compound, and they were full. So altogether, there was probably 10,000. By the way, we didn't stay in this place very long. The dog huts.
Yeah. And did they build more?
They built a
buildings?
new lager, and it took a whole day to move us. We didn't have anything to eat that day because we had to be lined up to get ready to move. And anyway, we moved into a barracks 8. I think it was room 5, I believe. It's in my book. I can't remember all this stuff. But anyway, there's no facilities, no beds or anything like that. Oh, each room had a stove, and there was a bale of Excelsior that you use for packing pottery and stuff. So we had some paper sacks. So we came along and opened up the Excelsior bale and put this stuff in the sacks to form a mattress. And we all laid mattresses along the walls with a little place to walk in between. And this is how we slept. And there was a little light bulb up there. I don't know, it might have been 25 watts or something. And it went off at 10.
Now, what sort of orientation do you get when they get there? Do either the Germans or other prisoners tell you anything about how the place works and what you're supposed to do?
No, but everybody was anxious for information. They wanted to know how the war was going.
But basically, you have to go into some kind of routine there, right? I mean, what is a day like when you're in this place?
The first thing that happens in the morning is you get some hot water, and then after you get your hot water, you stand out and be counted. And then at noontime, you'll get maybe a kohlrabi stew or some potatoes, and this will be maybe a 1 cup. And I was eating out of a Klim can, so I got just a portion of the Klim can. Okay, that's one meal, and then the other meal would be, you'd get potatoes one meal, maybe the kohlrabi stew the other meal, and that was it. And then you also got 1/7 of a loaf of bread. That was your day ration. But luckily, it got to the point where we were getting Red Cross parcels. We were supposed to get 1 per man per week, and we only got 1/4 of a man per week. So what we had to do is split it up. But anyway, that helped us survive, believe it.
Yeah. What kinds of things did they put in the Red Cross parcels?
Oh, well, there was a 1 pound can of Clem, which is milk backwards, and it's powdered milk, and it's whole milk. And anyway, you can mix that up with water. You can make mix, or you make it thicker. You can make some kind of a pudding or something.
Right.
And it had 2 D-bars, I think, and it had bully beef, corned beef. It's in my book, but I can't remember. And it's sugar, sugar and coffee. 1 little can of coffee, and some crackers, K2 crackers. I guess that's what they give the military, K2 crackers. Right. And that's about it. There's a lot there, but just offhand I can't come along and tell you.
Did they put cigarettes in those?
Yeah, there were cigarettes in there. There were 4 packs of cigarettes.
Okay. Now, did you smoke at that time?
No.
Okay.
But I traded cigarettes for chocolate.
Okay.
And cigarettes were our form of money, by the way.
Okay. Now, were the Germans interested in getting those things, or could you swap things with the guards, or did they just stay away from that?
No, we didn't. No, we were in an Air Force camp, and they were very strict. We had one guy I guess he's second to the heads of the guards. They called him Big Stoop, and he hated Americans, and he was noted for slapping you on the side of the head and stuff like that, and which is not good for your eardrums. But anyway, everybody just tried to stay away from him. If we saw him anywhere, we went somewhere else. But the rest of the guards, we had 2 of them that were in Saginaw at one time. One guy, one of his best friends had a hardware store, Wellsville Hardware in Saginaw on Gratiot Street. It was one of his best friends. But I knew Paul Wellsville, but we didn't get into any more of that except the fact that that was his friend. And he worked at Malibu Iron in Saginaw, but I think he went back because of the Depression, went back to Germany. But then we had another guy. He had a green uniform. I guess it was the Army uniform. We called him the Green Hornet, and I think the only reason he was there is because he could speak English. but I understood he was from Saginaw. But he used to come in and he'd say, we had one guy in our room, his name was Love. He'd say, oh, your name is Love, and you come over here and make war against the German people. And then we had another guy, Bachmann. Good German name like Bachmann, and you come over here and bomb us. And anyway, he'd do that. And I mean, nothing that you could call war crimes or anything,
Right.
but they were kind of needless,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Right. How would you spend your time during the day while you're there? What did you do?
Well, during the day, I guess we had cards that were provided by the Red Cross, and a lot of the guys would play solitaire, and the guys that didn't play solitaire would sit around helping the guy. And then also, we had a library that got started by the International YMCA, donated a lot of books. And anyway, we were able to come along and read books, and then one guy would read a book, and then we'd all sit around and discuss it. He would describe it, and we'd all discuss it. And my first book, believe it or not, I wanted to get The Tree Grows in Brooklyn, but that you couldn't. There's no way you could get that one. Mm-hmm. But anyway, my first book was Chemistry for Nurses. But anyway, I've got a list of all the books that I read. I brought the list back with me, and some of them were good. You know, Holy Old Mackinac. That's about Michigan,
Mm-hmm.
and there are a lot of real good books. It isn't all Chemistry for Nurses type of thing. But that's and then at night we had card games going all the time.
Okay. Now, were there guys who had different kinds of rackets going, either trading different kinds of things or finding ways to get ahead or get better stuff or
No.
like that?
Usually when we got the cigarettes or the chocolate or whatever, we'd make our deals right then and there, and that would be it. But I got a job of being a bread cutter. The seven men that I was with, that I teamed up with in the room, we had to divide this loaf in 7 ways. Now, the one end of the loaf was smaller than the other end, so you couldn't very well cut it in equal pieces. Mm-hmm. So what you had to do was estimate. The smaller end had to get a wider piece. And anyway, then we'd draw cards for it. And the way it is, the high card would have first choice. Well, after he got first choice, he decided, well, that was wrong. He didn't get the right one. So then we decided to use what they call a bridge cut. This is where you got 2 aces and 2 kings and 2 jacks, mm-hmm. and you come along and put a card next to each piece of bread, shuffle the cards, whatever you got, that was the piece you picked out. That way you didn't have to worry about whether you picked the wrong piece or not. But anyway, I become a bread cutting specialist because I could get them as equal as I could.
Mm-hmm. All right. How were you organized? Were there men who were in charge? Because they had enlisted men all together in this camp.
Right.
They were not officers there.
Well, we had a camp, a leader a lager leader. I don't remember how he was elected, but each room had a leader. But we had to elect a leader. But anyway, then we had details that had to be done, like sweep the room, mm-hmm. Get water, go get the food, things like this. And we had at that time we had 20 men in the room. 2 men each day were for the detail, which means they only had this job every 10 days, mm-hmm. which wasn't bad. And that's the way it worked. We just rotated. It wasn't bad, but when I got, incidentally, there were times when we had to peel potatoes for the cookhouse, mm-hmm. and it was not bad when the weather was nice. We weren't allowed to do it inside.
Oh.
We had to do it outside. But anyway, when it got real cold, the 2 men that were on duty, they were helped by everybody. I mean, everybody chipped in and peeled potatoes. We had it done in a matter of minutes, whereas these poor guys would be working for 20 minutes or so, mm-hmm. or half hour cutting, cleaning potatoes.
What would the extra men be peeling potatoes with? I mean, did you have knives or tools or
something?
Well,
we had a butter knife, a butter knife and a spoon and a fork from the Luftwaffe. It had a Luftwaffe insignia on it, but we didn't have any knives that that's sharp or anything.
Right. Okay, but you still had stuff that you could do.
But we could still open up cans even with a butter knife. If you held that up in the right spot and you hit it, mm-hmm. it would go in, and you could open up a can.
Okay. Now, did you have any way of getting any information about how the war was going?
Well, we had we had, the International YMCA brought a whole bunch of musical instruments in. We had enough people around there that could play a musical instrument, and they had a show playing music that we liked. And after the show, it was a couple of days after the show, we had comedians and everybody told jokes. After a couple of days after the show, a guy comes into the room. He was one of the comedians, and he had men stationed at each end of the barracks watching out for guards. And he had the news written on a little piece of paper, and he read the news to us. And he would go from room to room, making sure that there was no Germans around. And we knew all about the Battle of the Bulge and all that stuff. We knew how the war was coming.
Did you have any idea where the news came from?
No, at the time. But anyway, we had some phonographs that were brought in by the YMCA, and I found out later that one of the phonographs had a radio built in.
Oh. All right. Now, as the war was going on and you were getting some news about how things were going, did the atmosphere in the camp change, or did the behavior of the Germans change? As you know, the Russians, you're in the eastern area, the Russians are kind of moving in your direction. Was there much of a change as the Russians got closer, or?
No, as far as the guards are concerned, no, there wasn't. But we were in hopes that the Russians were going to liberate us, because they were coming in from the south and from the east, and we were hoping they were going to be able to liberate us. But anyway, you know, I don't know how long you've got for this program, but I better start telling you some more things. But anyway, it was December. The Russians made a big drive into Germany, into Silesia. Is where they started. Anyway, they start working up to Pomerania, which is where we were.
Right.
And anyway, we were told by our leaders, when the Russians come, treat the Germans good, because we knew the Russians were going to be real hard on them. You know, go by the Geneva Convention, you know.
Right.
Well, anyway, every night we'd listen we could hear gunfire and cannons going off and everything else. And next day, nothing happens. One night, the commandant comes in with this Green Hornet who speaks English, and he says, "Get ready we've got orders to evacuate the camp, and you got a day to get ready. And then at 7:30 in the morning, we're going to leave. We're going to march out. We haven't got no transportation. We have no way of feeding you, but we've got orders to evacuate the camp. Someday we'll be able to feed you. Right now, you're going to have to live on your Red Cross food." So anyway, we had a day to get ready. Then the particular morning, it was February the 6th of 1945. And anyway, it was very cold. We were marched out a gate past the warehouse where all the Red Cross parcels were. Everybody was given one Red Cross parcel as they marched out. We were one of the last groups to go through. They had a lot of Red Cross parcels, so they said, "Well, take two." Well, I was only prepared to carry one, but I was not going to I wasn't going to refuse that second one. So anyway, I had a sling that I could carry the first one in. The second one, I just hold it on top of the sling, and just march along. We were marching through a woods, and it was just nothing but a dirt road that was all churned up from people walking on it. So anyway, after a while, you come along and move this. Maybe you carry it over here, and then you carry it over here, and then you carry it here. And I was hoping, well, I got to eat up some of this food so I don't have to be carrying all this all the time. So in 2 or 3 days, I was able to eat up most of the food. But anyway, that night we walked. It was miserable. We walked till dark. We were standing in 6 inches of mud, and there was a barn here and a barn there, and they counted off 500 of us to go into this barn. And we were all mad because the way it was, we were just mad. And we all went into, everybody was trying to force a way into the barn to get the best spot, like a hayloft or something. We got in there, and there was just enough room to sit, and that was it. And we all sat in the dark. And anyway, there happened to be a fellow up in the hayloft that had a guitar. He started playing tunes. He played for about 20 minutes. Everybody was quiet. And he says, "Are there any requests?" And some guy says, "Yeah, how about let me sleep in your barn tonight, mister?" And everybody laughed. And from then on, they told jokes all night. But anyway, the next morning I got up and I couldn't figure out how we could get so many men in that barn. But anyway, it went on that way for about 3 days. You walk all day. And the one night I was so tired I couldn't even, my buddies were up in a hayloft, and I was too weak to even climb up there. But somebody helped me up.
Were there men who were too sick or otherwise hurt and couldn't stay with you, or?
Not in the beginning, but but later on, maybe a week or so later, the guys were falling by the wayside. They were just beat, and I didn't know it at the time, but the Germans had a wagon way in the back, and they were picking up these stragglers. Well, it wasn't us, the German guards. We have German guards that were like 60, 65 years old.
Yeah.
They couldn't take this. I saw guards throw their guns away. And you know, at the time, there was really no sense in trying to escape. Here we're deep into Germany, and if you escape, what are you going to do?
Right. Now, back when you were in the camp, was there anyone who would try to escape or anything like that going on?
Oh, one guy wanted to swap his army pants for my coveralls because he thought they wouldn't be recognized as a prisoner, and I refused him. There's no way you can escape from that camp. We had spotlights all over the place, and dogs, machine guns all over, and there's no way. If you got anywhere, we had a warning rail that was maybe 15 feet away from the regular fence, and if you got around that warning rail, they'd shoot at you. So you couldn't even get near the fence. So he was going to make a break for it. I told him, I says, forget it. I said, if you're going to do it during a snowstorm with a white suit or something on, so that they can't see you and maybe the dogs can't track you.
Right.
But I never heard. Anyway, by the way, we called him long, lean, and unclean. He was the dirtiest guy I ever run into.
All right. So how long did they have you marching through Germany then? They've taken you out of the camp?
Some guys walked for 86 days.
How long did you have to walk?
I didn't walk 86 days. I got sick. I teamed up with, we had what they call combines. 3 guys would get together, take care of each other. We called it a combine. One guy would maybe get firewood to build a fire, another guy would get water, and another guy would maybe take care of where to get a place to sleep. They called it a combine. I didn't belong to a combine, unfortunately. I got separated from my guys. Later on, I found 2 guys, and we formed a combine. About that time, I got diarrhea. We were waiting for a train to pick us up on a 0 day, and I sat on the ground, and I got diarrhea. And anyway, it wouldn't stop. I eat any food, and it'd go right through me. So finally, I had to tell one of the German guards about it. And they walked me over to a hospital barn that was maybe 1.5 miles or so away. And then they put me in a sheet barn with walls about that thick, gave me a Red Cross parcel. I was able to lay down, cover up with a blanket. There's no heat there, but this walls are so thick that our own heat kept it bearable, and the blanket. So anyway, I was there for about 3 days or so until my diarrhea subsided, and then they made me moved me into a real cold barn, and I looked all over. Nobody would allow me to lay next to them. Nobody would allow it. I walked up to the hayloft, and everybody's protesting. I got in on the end of a line. There was the hell with them. I was crawling in the hay. Anyway, I found out that the barn leader and his bunch were up there, and they didn't want me because he knew things about getting food and stuff that the rest of us didn't know. Well, anyway, what happened is they were bringing up barley in milk cans. Anyway, they'd come up in the hayloft, and we were all eating out of tin cans at the time, and tin cans were passed down to where the can was, and they'd fill it and pass it back. Well, I noticed that this barn leader and his buddies had more cans passed there than there were people. So I figured, well, you know, I got to get in on this, so I start passing the second can down. And they didn't say anything because they knew I was onto them. They couldn't very well say anything against me. But anyway, that went on for a little while. Well, then a German general came by, and he was going to get us put in a prison camp. It was about 0 weather. They put, I think it was 49 of us in a wagon. There were several wagons, but 49 of us in a wagon. And we went to New Brandenburg, and the prison camp was having a typhus epidemic. And they wouldn't let us in. All this time we're standing out there in these wagons. And we had to go back to where we were, to the barn. We were in their wagons for 16 hours, and I froze my feet and my hands very badly. And anyway, the next day, I pulled some shenanigans. Anyway, this was a state farm that we were staying at. There was a house that the head one stayed in. Behind the house was a cellar where you can grow stuff ahead of time. And anyway, we're all here getting roll call, checking, they're counting us and everything. I thought to myself, this is when I was having trouble with my feet being cold. I thought to myself, if I'm going to survive this war, I'm going to have to start taking care of myself. So when nobody was looking, I walked over to that greenhouse and down some stairs, into the door. And then anyway, inside it was nice and warm, and they had seed beds. So then heat underneath and everything. I got me a crate, and I come along, took my shoes off, put my feet in a vent, and I'm sitting there, and a Frenchman, one of those forced laborers, came along. I gave him a couple of cigarettes, not to give me away, and for a couple of days there, I did that. Right after roll call, I'd go down there, and I'd stay down there for a couple hours, warming my feet. One day, a German general comes walking through. He says, "Good morning," in German, and kept on going. I never went back there again. But anyway, they put us, I'm going to have to shorten this up, or you're going to have 2 hours on this deal.
2 hours is fine.
So anyway, eventually they told us that there was a general that visited us and told us that the trainer's going to come and pick us up. So anyway, we didn't have to walk too far this time, and we knew just 50 men to a car, and their cars are smaller than ours. But anyway, we got in the cars, and we're going so many kilometers this way and so many back this way and back and forth. Finally, we got going, and we traveled all night, and we wound up the next day in Hamburg, and we were at a little outlying train station in the suburbs. Somebody come along and counted us, wanted to know how many were in the car, and anyway, we were allowed to get out and move around a little bit. Then they put us back in. Anyway, then the German Red Cross come along, and gave us a piece of sausage about that long, a round piece, and a piece of bread, part of a loaf. And anyway, I thought that was just out of this world. Well, anyway, then we moved off. Next morning, we wound up at another prison camp called Fallingbosel 357. Well, I'd never heard of it before. But anyway, we got off the trains, and the bombers from England were flying over. We could see the B-17s.
Right.
And we kind of cheered them on a little bit. You lucky stiffs and this and that. And we wound up in a prison camp with a bunch of British that were captured in North Africa. Oh, I'll tell you, there were no Red Cross parcels or anything at this place. And it was starvation. I'm telling you, I was hungry, a lot hungrier there than I was at the first prison camp. But anyway, they had that thing. The English they had little stores and stuff. They were infantry. They were allowed to keep everything that they had, except for their guns.
Right.
They were allowed to keep everything, and then they brought accordions with them and all kinds of things. And anyway, they had little stores around there with trading for food and everything. They even had a little stock exchange. If you had some food, you could turn it into the store and get some points for it, and the points were put on a record. And then later on, if you got more food that was cheaper, you could take these points and buy more food than what you originally had, you know, regular stock market. And it was really interesting walking around there and see these guys. They were an ingenious bunch. And then they had what they called blowers. It was a tin can thing that had fire in it. And then on top it had a grill, and you could set a can on there. And anyway, you put paper and twigs and stuff in there and turn the crank here, and the blower would blow air into it. And you could boil water in about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. It was that hot. But anyway, this is what they used. We thought that was quite a deal. So anyway, the British were rather tough. They caught one of their boys stealing. They threw him in the outhouse. And one of our guys came over and says, "Hey, you know, you want to go over and see this? We're getting an echo here somewhere."
He just opened the door. It's
Anyway,
okay.
he says, hey, you want to come and see this? I said, no, I don't want. The guys are going over there and peeing on him.
Mm-hmm.
He's standing in the outhouse. I said, isn't it too deep? And he says, no, it's only up to their knees. So, but I didn't go.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's the way they were with their own people. And we had one American that got some cigarettes. There was a parcel. He just so happened that he happened to be there where the parcel was there. And anyway, he got a whole bunch of cartons of cigarettes. And you know what happened during the night? He was sleeping in a tent. Somebody slit that tent.
Mm-hmm.
They took all those. He was using them as a pillow. They took all the cartons of cigarettes. So anyway.
That's for you.
Let me take a drink of water here.
Yep. Okay. Now, by this time, we've made it into about March of '45 or so. If you've been on the road and moving in these different places.
So anyway, we also had the news every day at this place. And one day, Germans come along and said, "Move out." So one of the British guys came into the room. He says, when they come along and tell you to start moving out, take your coat, put your coats on. When they leave, take your coats off and sit down. Stall.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, the German came in, the sergeant, get ready to mow. We put our coats on. He leaves. We sit down. He comes back a little while later, and he sees all of us sitting down, and he leaves. And the next thing you know, we got a bunch of soldiers with fixed bayonets coming in, and we decided to stop playing games.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, they took us out to a gate. There were a whole bunch of German. Now the war front was getting close, and there was all kinds of German vehicles parked under the trees, airplanes flying around looking for something to shoot.
Right.
And anyway, we had to sit and wait for a little while. And a couple of British guys decided it was tea time. You know, they got to have their tea. You know.
Right.
So they're coming along and making tea, and this big stoop, this guy from the other prison camp. He hates everybody. Anyway, he comes along and he kicks that thing and knocked it about 20 feet away. He holds his machine chest across his chest, and he's bellowing for us to get in line, you know, in ranks. So anyway, we got in ranks, and we walked maybe 5 kilometers or something, and all of a sudden an airplane comes zooming over the trees, right where we were. And it was a German plane being pursued by an American plane, and he got shot down. And we could hear him crash, but he was only maybe 15, 20 feet above us. But anyway, we could hear it crash. Well, a little while later, we came to a hill where we could look all around, and we could see smoke and everything coming up where that plane crashed. But anyway, then we stayed at a farmer in his farmer's barn. By the time I got there was no place to sleep. No place. So you couldn't sleep on the ground. You couldn't sleep anywhere except outdoors. I spotted a hole in a threshing machine, and I crawled in that hole, and I slept on a conveyor belt, which was like this. And anyway, that's where I spent the night. But anyway, the days were getting a lot better at this time because it was warm. And we were passing through villages where the bridges were mined to be blown up, and people were all wearing guns and everything, ready to fight, you know, and this and that. And I'll have to get into a story here where we were crossing a bridge. We were getting ready to cross a bridge, and anyway, all of a sudden we hear it. We had been hearing airplanes before. You can usually hear them wind up before they get ready to shoot. You can hear the propeller change, propeller pitch. But anyway, we're just walking across this bridge, and I hear these seven British planes up there. All of a sudden, I can hear them going, you know, and I'm thinking, they're going to strafe this bridge, and our column is on it. And how do they know whether we're Germans or Americans? So anyway, we just kept on walking, and there were 20-millimeter guns on both sides of the bridge, and the guns were shooting at these planes. And anyway, they went over us, and they were shooting at something on the other side of the river. But boy, I'll tell you, I had a helpless feeling. I was ready to jump behind a girder. I mean, really. But anyway, 7 of them made their attack, and they blew up some tank cars on the other side of the river on the railroad track. And anyway, that was kind of a funny experience. Well, anyway, then we had another incident where we were in a barn, and it was right next to a highway. And the British had Bristol, they were plywood bombers. What do they call this? Anyway, there was a plywood bomber Oh, I can't think of
Well,
it.
there was the mosquito.
Mosquito.
Yeah.
It was a mosquito. But anyway, the mosquitoes were patrolling the highways at night, and if they'd see any convoy or anything at night, they'd shoot a rocket.
Mm-hmm.
And God, they shot a rocket off near this barn that we were at, and I must have jumped a foot. And the next day I come on and moved out of there, and I laid underneath a wagon a little farther away from the road. But that was, I mean, I'll tell you, I've got so much to say, I'm going to have to kind of jump, or I'll never get this finished. So anyway, they just kept moving us from one farm to another. They didn't want to burden any farmer. They were feeding us barley and stuff like this. They weren't. We had meat on one occasion, but the rest of the time it was all barley and stuff like that. But anyway, finally we got to a little intersection called KL Zekter. It was just a little community, just an intersection, and we stayed there. And anyway, the German woman, you know, they knew the Russians were not very far. The Germans are starting to treat us pretty good. And anyway, she come along and baked us each a little cake and made soup for us and everything else. And finally, one of the guards said, Americans are in the next village. So the Germans all got together and they were sitting around. I don't know if they were playing cards or just talking, but they had one man on guard duty and their rifles were all stacked. And anyway, a Jeep came driving into town, and there was a British officer and an American sergeant, and came driving up, and they got out, and the German guard on duty threw his gun down, and everybody's got their hands up, and these Americans, the British are there. And so anyway, they told us they will round up all the guns and put them in a big pile and start rounding up Germans. So we start rounding up Germans, and it was kind of funny. We found a German supply truck. It had a whole bunch of German money on it. It had schnapps and all kinds of liquor and big pieces of big loaves of bread. I got a half a loaf of bread. Another guy got a half a can of jam. We decided to sit down and eat. And I'm sitting down eating as a German officer comes along and he wants to give up. He wants to give up to me. And I said, well, you're going to have to sit down and wait till I get done eating. So anyway, we're going along, and then one of the ex-POWs now comes up and he says, hey, he says, do you want some eggs? He says, just walk in that house over there and sit down at the table. She'll automatically fire you up some eggs. So I told this German officer, I said, you're going to have to come with me. So we go into the house, I sit down, and she's starting to fry up some eggs. And in the meantime, he talked she could speak a little English. He talked to her, and he wanted to know if he could go back to his quarters and get his shaving stuff. And I said, yeah, you can go there. So about the time that I'm all done eating, he comes back, and I take him to an enclosure where we captured all the prisoners. Well, anyway, then I decided we had enough of walking. So we had already looted a truck and got all the souvenirs, but I was tired of walking, so I wanted to go to the next town. I was going to get a car. I got halfway there, and I was getting tired, and I was tired of walking, so I walked into a farmhouse in the back, and there's a bicycle there. There's a man and a woman standing there. I take the bicycle, and I'm riding away. I said, good day, you know, and I'm riding away. I get about a quarter of a mile down the road, and the tire goes flat. So I get into the town, and there's trucks and everybody going through the town. I think there's a war still on. What they're doing is they're getting away from the Russians.
Right.
The Germans are all loaded up in trucks. You're getting away from the Russians. They wanted to get captured by the Americans. So anyway, I'm heading back to my buddies by now, and along comes this truck that my buddies got, and it uses a thing that you put pieces of wood in there. It's got a fire underneath.
Right.
They got that thing going, and anyway, I got on that thing, and they had a roof on the back, a plywood roof. We got underneath that thing and pushed that roof off to the side of the road, and the guys are drinking schnapps and stuff, and they're singing, and we had a ball. So
how long was it then before you actually got back into order, or somebody
well,
told you what to do?
anyway, then we came up to a bridge, and there was stalled vehicles all along the bridge. And anyway, by now, when we got up to the bridge, the MPs made us push the truck off the road. So we were bound and determined we were going to get a car. So anyway, we're looking at all these cars that are lined up there, and some of them had the ignition torn out. See, what they wanted to do was block the road so the Russians couldn't come in there.
Right.
So anyway, we found a car with the engine ran. So Red and I went back and found our packs, got our packs. We come back there, and old Red is swearing up a storm. He puts the car in gear. It didn't go anywhere. They stripped the gears. So anyway, we had to start walking again. Anyway, we get to walking, and a Jeep pulls up. It's from ex-prisoner from New Zealand. He says, "Hey, my name is Wells. You Yanks want to come along?" "Yeah, we sure do." So we get up to the bridge, and the MP says, he says, "I'm going to let you go across the bridge, and when you get on the other side, you push this Jeep in the river. We don't want you blocking the road." So anyway, we get in there, and we're going across the bridge, and I'm thinking to myself, we got to keep this car. I looked up ahead, and there was a cow lane, a little lane for cows. I said, "Go straight." The road turned this way. I said, "Go straight." We went straight, and we went, I don't know, about a half a mile, and we come to another road. And now we still had a bridge to cross, another bridge. And I was afraid they were going to now not let us go across. So anyway, we found a gun crew, a 20 millimeter English gun crew, and they said, "Well, you Yanks got to have supper with us." So they got a whole crate of eggs, a crate full, I mean a big crate full of eggs, and they fried, we had eggs and tea. And then we told them, well, we're afraid they're going to take our car away from us. We go down there. What it was a pontoon bridge, because the bridge, this is the bridge we walked across where we were shot at,
Right.
or we thought we were going to get shot at. They blew it up. So anyway, we went across that pontoon bridge, and we saw one of the last actions. A house was blown up from cannon fire. And anyway, they just waved us across. And then that night, we were driving real late that night, and we pulled into a town, and a Jeep with what do you call it, a light was shining at us. And anyway, the guy says, "What are you guys doing driving around at this time of the night?" He says, "Don't you know that there's Germans that are still fighting?" And we said, "Yeah, but we don't know where to stay." He says, "Well," he says, "I'll take you over to the mayor's house, and the mayor will get you a place to sleep." So he drops us off at the corner, and we knock on the door, and finally the mayor sticks his head out the window. He doesn't have any room for us. So this guy comes around with a Jeep, comes back, and he takes us to his commanding officer. So we're going to stay at their house. They took over the best house in the village. So anyway, I shared a bit with the lieutenant, and I hope he didn't get my fleas. Oh, I had a lot of fleas. So the other guys, they stayed in another room with the enlisted men. And anyway, the next day happened to be Sunday, and they took us to a schoolhouse where their kitchen was, and we had the best meal. Oh, I'm telling you, mashed potatoes and the coleslaw, and not coleslaw.
Sauerkraut, or?
No, not sauerkraut. The meat, Swiss steak.
Okay.
Swiss steak, gravy, peaches for dessert. And oh, that felt good. You know, I got out of there, and all of a sudden my mouth started to water, and up it went. My stomach couldn't handle it.
Couldn't handle the good food, yeah.
So anyway, then I tried it. We stayed with another outfit the next night. Same thing. Finally decided to go to the hospital. The doctor bawled us out, made us stand at attention, and told us we better quit eating, start in real slow. And we started in real slow, and that took care of it. But anyway, we wound up at an airport called Selly, which is a British airport. And we had to spend 4 or 5 days there for an airplane to come in, and the airplane flew us to Brussels, Belgium. And Brussels, Belgium was controlled by the British, but they issued British uniforms to us guys, but I wouldn't take one. The other guys did, but I wouldn't. I wanted to keep my flying coveralls on. So anyway, the next day, this is VE Day, May the 8th.
Right.
And Brussels, fireworks all over the place, and everybody was happy. So anyway, the next day they put us on a train, took us to Namur, Belgium, and there we were under the control of the American Army. They came along and deloused us, and I was able to keep my uniform, my flying coveralls, but they were deloused with gas. And anyway, they gave us some invasion money and nice clothes, and had Belgian women bringing food to the table. It was all you wanted to eat, and that was great. So then they put us on some GI trucks, took us to a place called Camp Lucky Strike. This is right on the French coast.
Right.
And anyway, we spent a few days there, but I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to go to Paris. I got out on the highway, and the truck picked me up, and we went about 2 miles down the road, and there was a roadblock, and the MPs wanted to see my pass. I didn't have a pass, so I figured, well, I'm gonna walk around these guys and start hitchhiking again. So in the meantime, I see all these emplacements over on the coast, big guns and all that stuff for the invasion, you know. And I decided to go see that, and I spent the rest of the afternoon looking at all these enforcements, you know. And then finally I walked back to the camp, but I missed a supper. But they were giving out eggnog. The Red Cross was giving out eggnog, and that's really good for you if you need the nourishment.
Right.
And they had a musician there by the name of Alec Templeton, a blind musician, played the piano. And at night there were crap games. And anyway, then the next couple of days, they shipped us over to Le Havre. And anyway, first thing they do is line us all up and don't go away, we got KP for you. Well, no way am I going to work KP. I walked out the front gate and went down to downtown Le Havre. And anyway, I ran into some guy that was working on a barge, and they took me across the bay, and then they invited me for supper on their barge. They had their own cook and everything. I got back to the point where I was going back to the camp, and I forgot where it was. And it's getting dark, and I found out I was going around in circles, and it started to rain. I got in somebody's doorway, and a Frenchman invited me in for tea. Well, after tea, I got out again, trying to find this camp that I left that I forgot where it was. And some guy passed me at night, and he says, "Hey, soldier, where are you going?" And I told him, and he says, "Well, I'm going there." So he took me there, and the next day I figured, well, I'm going to stay put. That guy, the doggone sergeant, said, "Stick around, we got KP for you." I walked out the gate and went back to downtown Le Havre again. This time I got back on a truck, on a GI truck. So anyway, we got on a ship. And we took off, and we went to Southampton, England, but we didn't land. We had to just drop anchor. I guess they wanted orders on going across the ocean. So anyway, it was a couple hours later we took off, and it was a pleasant trip, except it was crowded. They had more men than they had bunks, and we had to sleep, I think, like 1 out of every 3 days on the deck. No problem. So anyway, we got near America, and I see this bellbuoy, and it's all fog, bellbuoy going back and forth. I thought, boy, we're near America, but we got to go so slow because of the fog. It's going to be hours before we get there. And anyway, I went downstairs, and a little while later, Red was one of my partners there. He comes down, he says, "Al, quick, come up on deck." I get up on deck, and here we're in New York Harbor. I can see Statue of Liberty over here, Ellis Island over here, Brooklyn over here, and there's a big sign on Brooklyn that says, "Welcome home, well done." And then there was a ship all full of girls with a band. And I'll tell you, I cry anytime I talk about this. Anyway, that was our greeting in New York.
Wow.
It was great.
So if you look back on the whole thing now, what do you think were sort of maybe the lasting effects of this whole experience on you? Did it change the way you looked at the world, or?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. You look at the last page of my book, and it'll tell you. I'll tell you what counts in this world. It's not the fancy things. It's not fancy cars, fancy clothes. It's the everyday things. These are the things that you miss the most: bread and butter, a clean shirt, a bath, a nice bed to sleep in. Yeah, that's what you miss. But I get real touchy when I remember that deal in the harbor. That was quite a welcome. But then we went to a little camp right nearby, Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. And anyway, it was just about 10 miles, dang it. Went by train. And there were German POWs frying up steaks, and there were AAA steaks. AAA. Then the next day, Ed, he's a Polak from Chicago. He and I were on the same train because we went to Fort Sheridan, Illinois. And then from Fort Sheridan, we were allowed to go home. And then after I was home a month, I got a telegram, but I wasn't home. But I'll give it against another month to report to Miami Beach. And anyway, eventually I reported to Miami Beach, and they shipped me to Wilmington, North Carolina. And I was a helper in a radio shop there, B-26 bombers they had, and P-47 fighters. And the war was over, and the airplanes weren't flying anymore. So they moved me out to the intercoastal waterway, and there was a ship out there, an air-sea rescue ship, and they made me a radio man on the ship. And all I did really is hold guard duty and make sure that it didn't get hung up on the dock when the tide came in and out. And anyway, then I got 73 points, and the ship made a Goldsboro, North Carolina, and I got discharged. So.
And when you got back home, did you go back to the phone company or do something else?
I wanted a better job. They wanted to give me my old job. No, actually, technically, they didn't have to. You have to work 6 months.
Okay.
I only worked 2 months.
Right.
So anyway, I told them, I says, I want a better job. So, well, we don't have a better job. So anyway, I had a date with a gal that worked at the company, and I was down in the lobby waiting for her for lunch. And one of the big bosses come by, and he says, Alex, how come you're not working for the company? And I says, well, I want such and such a job, and they didn't have any. He says, well, give me your telephone number, and I'll give you a call. So then, a couple of days later, he gave me a call, and they had a job for me in Port Huron. So I went to Port Huron, and then eventually I got back to Saginaw. And I've been all over the place. I worked in Saginaw, Sault Ste. Marie, Marquette, Michigan, Bay City, all those places. I was an engineering assistant in Detroit. So I had a lot of jobs. I retired with 41 years.
Well, the whole thing makes for one heck of a story, even in the shortened 2-hour version. So
Well, there were a lot of little details that if I'd have talked about them, I mean, we could add another half hour.
I think we are at this point about out of studio time here. We can bring you back to over here to this end of Michigan. We'd love to talk to you some more. But in the meantime, I just want to thank you for coming in and telling this story. It's going to be a valuable addition to our collection, and a lot of people are going to get a lot out of seeing it. So thank you.